Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Hynd Parish Town Council Policy and Resources Committee. Before we begin the business of the meeting, we will hold a minute's silence in memory of His Royal Highness the late Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to on February the 9th. He was the longest serving consort in British history. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda are declarations of interest. To receive declarations of interest, disposable pecuniary.
Excuse me, sorry, Tina, we haven't had apologies.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Right. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies. To receive and accept apologies for absence.
Councillor Barry Prigmore, we've got, and Councillor Gardner substituting. Councillor Thomas is not here, but I have had no apologies at the moment.
Okay, so right, thank you. Now item 2 is that declarations of interest. To receive declarations of interest, disposable pecuniary interests or other interests, and the nature of those interests relating to items on the agenda. Has anybody got anything they wish to declare as an interest? That's none, thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is to approve and sign as the correct record the minutes of the meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee held on the 9th of February 2021. You'll find copies on page 1 and 2 in your agenda pack. Has anybody got any comments they wish to make on the minutes?
I move they be signed, Madam.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Redding. And all those in favour, would you please show hands? Right, thank you. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is public forum to allow any member of the public to address the meeting for a period of no longer than 3 minutes each. Have we got any member of the public wishing to speak, Sandra?
No, nobody here.
Right, thank you. Item 5 on the agenda is review of policies. To review the following policies, which is on page 3, it's the data protection, the data breach policy, the management of records, the subject access procedure, statement of community engagement, and training statement of intent. Would you like to make any comment on any of those, Sandra?
No, I mean, they're down for no change. When we have the new council, what we tend to do is, because it is a new council, you will actually get a copy of each policy, so you have an opportunity as well to have a look at it. But there's nothing that I need to highlight to you at this time that needs changing.
Okay, so could I have a proposal that we don't change those? Thank you, Councillor Whiting.
I'll second that.
Seconded, Councillor Jackson. All those in favour, would you please show hands? Right, thank you. Right. Item 6 on your agenda is the business forward plan. To receive an update on progress with projects and works detailed in the current business forward plan, which is on pages 4. Sandra, would you like to run through this for us?
Yeah, I'll quickly run through this. The forward plan we will review as a full council to see where the council is going to go for the next 4 years. Cemetery land stroke allotments is on the agenda. Castle Fields, the management plan is something Heritage England wants us to do, and it's something we've never really got started, so we do need to have a look at that at some point. Events, including Heritage Day, is on here because it's a way of allocating projects that we're working on, because that takes staff capacity away from other things. The Greenway project, the recent path has been installed. I've got quotes for the street light and given the order for the street light that's needed along there. But I think, I'm sure you agree, that's an improvement already. We've got along to very close. The charters, I don't know if Alyssa's got anything to add on this, because this one had to sort of go very quiet during COVID because a lot of the items were face-to-face items which couldn't be delivered.
You're on mute, Alyssa.
Sorry.
Oh.
The project is due to finish autumn of this year. So there's a couple of meetings and reviews that we hope we can have towards the end of the summer and into the autumn to tick the rest of the boxes that we have in terms of meeting the requirements of the Heritage Lottery Fund. And there's the audio heritage trail that we've done as an alternative to not being able to meet some of the other conditions that were there.
Okay.
The common land at Glebe Farm is one which I will revisit with the new council. Obviously, we are promoting it to be used as a town green, but at some point the council's going to have to decide how far they want to go in respect of legal action on that one. The community building, it's one we said we'd defer as well to the new council, so we will look at that again for post-elections. In terms of other projects we had ongoing this year, the Mugger has now been resurfaced and it's all been repainted. So, and the tennis club are really pleased with that. In fact, we've got a boxing club using the Mugger at the moment twice a week because they needed some outside space, which is bringing in some extra income for the council. The churchyard notice board is now installed in the churchyard. Grounds maintenance contract review is something you're going to have to start working on towards the end of the year because the contract expires in 2022 November. But bearing in mind it'll need a tender process, you need quite a long lead-in time for this. And at this moment in time, we're not sure where the unitary is going to stand on being part of the grounds maintenance consortium. And this is something we're trying to get an answer to, because if we have to go out on our own on a tender process, that creates a whole nother level of work, because if we're part of the consortium, they lead on it and organise the tender, so we don't have to worry about that. Induction of new councillors, I always put that on there because there is a period of bedding in for new councillors and undertaking training for them, and we'll be looking to have a whole council training session, and possibly, if we can, some sort of team session where we look at the business plan to try and come together and work forward with the new councillors. The co-op bus lay-by, I've left that on there because that is closed at the moment temporarily with social distancing measures, but there's a fund out there that I have sort of flagged it up as a possible project and they haven't said no yet, so that's might be one that might come back onto the agenda. The toilets, we probably do need to look at refurbishing that, and we do have some funds in earmark reserves that were handed over from East Northants Council specifically for those works. The scattering of ashes area is now complete, and I've had some good feedback on that and how much better that looks from the public. The environmental policy and implementation is to do with climate change, and I think with all the work we had going on, I did agree with the Assistant Clerk and Councillor White in that we would leave this to post-elections to sort of resurrect this project again. It's the same with the community plan, the neighbourhood plan. Council wanted to leave that to post-elections. The community room, I've actually just had a drawing today from Snowdon Homes actually, which I've passed to Councillor Gardner, which sort of have to start looking at. I've had 2 or 3 inquiries actually about possible uses of that room, so that is something that is community are interested in. The Greenway, we did say we'd look at maintenance, but I know the Unitary Authority are looking at that. So I think at the moment we sort of leave that with them. And supporting businesses, we've just opened the High Street, so that's going to be ongoing work at the moment to get them supported and the High Street open and vibrant. And that's it.
Thank you very much. So can I have somebody to propose that we receive the business forward plan? Councillor Redding, could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Paul, and all those in favour, would you please show hands? Oh, Councillor Paul's disappeared. There he is. Right. Thank you. Right, item 7 on the agenda is the cemetery. To consider a report from the town clerk on search for a new cemetery and the availability of space in the current cemetery, which is on pages 5 to page 7 in your agenda pack. So Sandra, would you like to run through this for us?
Yeah, I tried to give you an overview of this project, which has obviously been going on for some years. You've got the information of what spaces we've got available. I've got some work I'm doing on the really old part of the cemetery, which possibly we'll be able to release up some space, certainly for ashes in there. In terms of a new plot of land, we really are a deadlock on this one, because the plots that are possible, most of it is owned by the Duchy. And as you see by the later report that I sent out from a few years ago, I did look at each piece of land and who was possible the owners of them, and there's some we can't identify at this time. And I think you do need to bear in mind, if you do go ahead with a new cemetery, it is quite a cost. When we originally costed it, we were looking at 300,000 for all the reports and actually making it into a cemetery, because of the requirements for burial land. If you had a plot of land for just ashes, there's not the same requirements on it from the Environment Agency. So that is always another option going forward, because that is easier to find a piece of land which it could be used.
Right, thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I vaguely remember when we spoke to the Duchy, Sandra, we were saying about this little different triangles of land, and we identified some of them. And then we was talking about planting trees, and I did float the idea at the time of more of a green way of doing ashes, where we just plant the trees and have the ashes scattered, much like they do over Findon and different other areas, becoming increasingly popular for promoting more of a green burial way, if one's a better term. Perhaps is something that we need to think about, because I mean, this has been going on for such a long time. I mean, you know, the reports that I've read, and we're running out of plots before we're ever getting anywhere. And if the Duchy are not going to meet us anywhere soon on this, I think we need to think a bit more proactive about how to source a little bit of land and think about how we can do just a scattering of ashes area.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. The Duchy, when we first asked them to look at various plots of land that they would consider being suitable, they did actually offer item on the map, if you look, 5, 6, 10 and 11, which I'm a little bit surprised, because close to it, it states that that's one of the highest aquifer. In other words, it's land saturated. So whether they offered this knowing full well it wouldn't be suitable, I'm not certain, but we turned it down because we said it was far too far out. But in line of the development that is going on east of the A6, we'll soon find that 5, 6, 10, 11 are quite close to the news, because we're talking about 10 years possible land available at this moment in our existing cemetery. So in 10 years' time, those plots that were offered, so I feel we should possibly consider asking the question, would 5 and 10 be available? Just to find out what the feeling is with the Duchy.
I think, in fact, we stopped looking because we thought that we'd solved it with Rushden East, didn't we? until they said that the cemetery was way the far side of Rushden. And I think from a point of view of a resident of Higham, I would rather see it go out towards the golf course on
Yes,
that.
That's where
converted
5,
route.
6, 10 and
That's-
11 are.
Yes, but that's nearer to us than the other side of Rushden, because we don't have to go through a town to get there. So yeah, so I agree with you, Councillor Jackson, that we should maybe ask the question, which one of those
They
that
would consider.
they would consider, yeah.
Because we wouldn't be looking, if we have 10 years supply, we wouldn't need to look for that for about another 5, 6 years, would we?
Yeah, no, but we need to ask the question now, I guess.
Oh,
before
yes.
before
Oh,
it
yeah.
gets allocated.
We
to
need to
something
put
else.
our marker on it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else got any comments they want to make? Sandra, is there any possibility that, Pam might know the answer to this, you know, the church has got gravestones in it. Is there any possibility that there might be some area within the church grounds for a cemetery, you know, to develop that cemetery?
I mean, it was closed, wasn't it? A long
Yeah.
time ago.
Be too
But
limited.
can you buy back like we're trying to do with ours? I mean, there's an awful lot
Not
of
sure. I mean, I know the church own quite a bit of land, you know, the other side of Stanwick Road. Exactly what they own or anything like that. I mean, what they've got intention for, I don't know. I mean, whether there's anything there, but as the town clerk says, you know, there's an awful lot of land that nobody really knows who owns what, you know. So, but I think as far as the churchyard is concerned, it seems to be taken over by Wildflowers and the Friends of St Mary's. So I'm going to have to say no. I don't think there would be, because there's all tombstones in there now, and some of them are very old, but there are lots of ashes buried in there
Okay.
as well.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Councillor Redding.
Oh, that's better. Sorry, the space bar doesn't seem to work for some reason when I'm doing that. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, there were two points. One was that when we last looked at this before we decided not to continue, I think the feeling amongst the majority of councillors at the time was that going out towards Chelveston was too far out. But I did make the point that it's still inside the parish, and therefore, you know, it was still town land, you know, inside the town boundaries, parish boundaries. As far as the churchyard is concerned, I would think that's a massive no-no, because if you look at the height of the land between the buildings, that gives you an indication of how many burials are there. Because going back hundreds of years, they would have just dug down again into the existing graves and basically reused them. But the land builds up round churches. That's why all churches appear to be sunk down. It's actually the land's risen because of the body. So I think there's an estimate of something like 4,000 or 5,000 bodies buried around the church.
Oh wow.
So you'd be looking at a great deal of work. You know, that's civil engineering, not reusing graves. I mean, I agree that I think we ought to be looking further out. Unfortunately, I can't find the map at the moment on my computer. But as Councillor Jackson said, there were some of those bits of land, and I can't remember the numbers, that did have something about chancery on it. And they're ones we would probably need to stay well clear of, because as I understand it, there is a chance of the church, if the church starts to collapse, that the church can actually call on the owners of that land to contribute. And I don't think we ought to be doing that as a council, adding to our possible, the possibility of being called on to spend possibly hundreds of thousands of pounds later on.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we have considered the report from the town clerk. So can I propose that we receive the report from the town clerk? Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll
Thank you,
second that.
councillor Jackson. And all those in favour, would you please show hands?
Is there any actions you want me to take?
Well, that I was going to put that separately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've received your report. We've taken note of your report. But do you think we ought to actually look at some of the options and ask the question from the the Duchy? You know, what are the real chances of us having a cemetery in one of those plots that they've highlighted?
I think what the next stage is to see if it's possible, because what happens, we have to then instruct the consultant, because they have to go onto the land and dig boreholes and
Yes.
things to test certain things like the water table and things like that. So I can go back to them and said, you offered us opportunity to go on the land to look at these, undertake further tests. Are you still interested? If they come back and said yes, I then go and get the costs for doing that, because that will have risen since we last had it done, and then take that back to council
Okay.
with a proposal.
Right, councillor Jackson, you had your hand up first.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I definitely feel that we have got time on our side, seeing as we've got 10 years supply, but time soon flies. So I would say with the Duchy, you need to start as quickly as possible, because they will take an awful long time to come back on this.
Okay.
So I would suggest that we do. We're going to have to spend some money. We have to accept it will cost a little bit of money to ascertain whether it is suitable.
Right,
Until we
thank
do
you.
that, we don't know.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, to go forth and explore this, most definitely. Number two, could we explore a different way, like the more ashes, a green way, if there's any land that could be adopted for that, taken up for that? And if all else fails, haven't we got a town green that nobody uses?
Yeah, well,
That's very tongue-in-cheek, councillor
yeah.
Gardner.
Would I say that?
Yes, you just have. Right. So we have actually received the report from the town clerk, and councillor Jackson, are you going to propose?
Yeah, sorry. No. This is an adding to councillor Gardner's. If you remember, the Duchy did look favourably on various areas where we could plant trees.
Trees, yeah.
So therefore, why don't we add on to this and say, would they be in agreement to being a free, open burial plot as well? Because if you imagine, you will put a tree, but of course, once you've done that, it limits that area. You wouldn't be able to bury that many people. It's surprising, because the trees, you couldn't plant too many trees too close to each other. So it would need a fair acreages. But the areas they're talking about for planting trees could be entirely separate to a cemetery.
But does that, when you say you plant a tree, do you actually bury your ashes and plant a tree on top? Is that what you mean?
Yes. Well, it's a
or is
body.
it a case of having a load of trees planted and people allowed to just
No. They do a body. They plant the body. Well, bury the body.
They plant the ashes.
Then, obviously, 6 foot down. Then the tree is planted over the top of.
They plant a body, not the ashes. That are you saying?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Well, this is a new green. That's just one of the things they're doing.
Okay. So for tonight's purposes, we're going to ask the Duchy of Lancaster if we can look at some. Well, are the plots still available, and can we actually start to look at the possibility of a cemetery or a green area,
Yeah.
a green planting ground? So yeah. So can we have somebody propose that then? Councillor Gardner, would you like to propose that?
I think
VJ's got his hand up.
got his hand
Oh,
up. Yeah.
sorry, Vijay. Councillor Paul, sorry.
Yeah, in reply, it's more of a question really to Councillor Jackson's information about planting a tree over a body. If you're planting a tree over a body, would there not be the connotation that that tree is somehow owned by the family that is buried, or the person that is buried underneath it, or the family of. So maintenance and all that kind of issues, who would that fall on?
I
In the
would
same
know,
way-
but I have seen adverts for this green burial, and that's the whole idea. I think basically you pay for the interment and the tree, and then it becomes eventually a forest. That's the whole
Okay.
purpose.
I think there is one near Olney. Perhaps we ought to sort of try and find out a little bit more about it. But in the meantime, go ahead with the discussions with the
Oh yeah,
Duchy
correct,
of Lancaster.
Yeah.
definitely.
So, Councillor Govan, would you like to make the proposal?
Yes, please. Can I propose that we go ahead and ask the Duchy for suitable land, and also on a secondary one, ask the Duchy for a more green way we could go for a cemetery, scattering of ashes or otherwise, and do that as soon as we can. Just be mindful of time.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second that.
Councillor Jackson, and all those in favour, would you please show hands? Any abstention? No, I think actually that's all in favour. Right, thank you, Sandra. Right, the annual town meeting, sorry, item 8, it's annual town meeting, to agree a date for the annual town meeting and agree where and how it is to be held. Over to you, Sandra.
Yes, we discussed this at the last meeting, and you wanted to postpone the meeting in the hope that we could have a face-to-face meeting with the public. Well, the deadline for holding this meeting is the 1st of June, so that is not really going to be feasible. I do know some councils aren't actually going to hold a meeting. There's no must on the council to call the meeting. It is just expected to hold it. You're supposed to have an annual meeting, but it doesn't necessarily have to be called by the council. So the option is we hold one before the 1st of June, but have it virtually, or you don't hold one. I mean, probably looking to hold it in May now.
Okay, so that would be after mayor making with new councillors and holding a town council meeting. I mean, a town meeting.
Yes, I mean, I would have to look at dates, but it might be, because we haven't got a poll now, we might hold it in between what would have been election day and mayor making. It's just that I have to have 7 clear days to call it, so it's not, I need to make sure there's enough time period to call it legally.
Councillor Paul?
Yeah, Andrea, for that. I think it would be, given what happened with the local elections and the lack of local elections on the council, I think we should have a public meeting, at least give people a chance that are interested to get involved with the town council to come along and join, even virtually. Maybe we can fill those couple of co-opted spaces we're going to have for next year.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Whiting?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'm all in favour of having it virtually if we're allowed to. But how do we get it out to the public? That, you know, there will be a meeting, and obviously they would all have to have the access to the Zoom meeting. I presume they would have to apply to the town hall for the link.
No,
How do we advertise it? Just website and notice board, or?
Yeah, the notice board, social media, website. I mean, at the moment, the town app, the links for council meetings are on the website, because we're not allowed to make it by application, so it would be freely available.
Right.
I mean, the other option is you do the virtual to do the minimum, to tick the box you've had an annual one, and when you can go back to face, hold a face-to-face one to talk to the public, rather than having to do what you normally do at the annual meeting.
Okay, Councillor Redding?
Every time. I agree with Councillor Paul to a certain extent that for the sake of democracy, seeing as nobody seems to be interested to stand for the council, and therefore we've all fallen into it by default again. There is a question: if we decided tonight just to do nothing, which, as far as I can tell from what Sandra's just said, is we do not have to call it, as I understood it. As it's meant to be held before the 1st of June, does that mean that a member of the public who just asked us to call or called one on our behalf, asked us to actually hold one, would have to have asked for that with more than 7 days before the 1st of June? Or
Yes.
would it be legal if it was still held after June?
It'd still be a parish meeting. It wouldn't be the annual parish meeting, but there's a lot of discussions on my forum. Who's going to challenge this? I mean, any member of the elector in Higham could actually call the annual meeting. There's nothing to stop them doing it. It's just practice, isn't it? It's just custom that
Yes,
it's called by the parish or town council.
I would say, though, that to be honest, if we are going to call a town meeting, we ought to have it before the election so that we're not running it with new councillors and, going to the public. I think it would be better and more comfortable to run it with the councillors that know what we've done over the last few years. Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm playing devil's advocate on this one. I think we've got so much going on and so much on our plate to run it with, some new councillors on board. If we're going to do it, let's just do it and, put it out there and let's do it. And at least then we've got a chance of getting more members of the public who perhaps didn't want to come out or feel more comfortable or just come and be nosy. If we're going to do it, let's just crack on and do it.
Okay.
Andrew, have you got a date in your head?
I haven't. I've got my diary here.
Because I've got, the election day is the 6th, isn't it? So on the 3rd of May is the bank holiday. So that's another day that's out. Councillor Redding, do you want to say something while we're finding diaries?
Well, I was actually going to go the other way, Madam Mayor. The fact that we've got a new council, to be brutally honest, I think there's only 4 new members. So they would, if the existing members of the council who will still be on the council after the 6th of May could easily field the questions dealing with what's gone before, but it would give the new councillors a flavour of what, if the town folk, the citizens, if any turn up, feel what the way they're looking at. They don't need to be there to answer questions necessarily, because they can hand on heart say, we don't know, we've only just arrived. It's not as if we've got 16 new councillors appearing in May. I think it's 4 off the top of my head. I can't remember now. 4, maybe 5, 4. So it's not even a majority of the existing council. So.
Remember, when you councillors are at that meeting, you're not a councillor, you're there as a member of the public. And again, it's custom that it's called by the mayor and the mayor chairs it. So in essence, answering the questions would really be myself or the mayor, because you're there as a member of the public.
Councillor Jackson, did you have your hand up a minute ago?
Well, I was going to say, I would have thought that we ought really to be considering including the new councillors as well. Not that, yes, I take on board as a member of the public, but we're all members of the public, but at least they'll get sort of an introduction. So I would have agreed with Councillor Redding, have it after the actual election.
Councillor Paul, sorry.
Best of both worlds potential solution here. Why don't we go with the existing council to have the meeting and then invite the new councillors as members of the public to watch and observe, because they're not going to be contributing anyway.
Right, but we're a bit short of time. But have you got your diary, Sandra?
Yeah, because originally, if you were going after the elections, I was going to suggest the 11th of May, but the alternative would be the 4th of May.
Star Wars Day.
I mean, we could hold it the 28th of April if you wanted, if I issued the agenda next week, Monday.
Would that be a bit rushed? I'm just,
You've got to
Well,
get,
I've got,
well, can I just have a look at the general feeling of the people? Do you, councillors, I mean, do you want it before the election or after the election? So can you just show your hand if you would like to go with it before the election? And if you'd like it after the election? Right. What about, yeah, it's my vote, isn't it?
yeah.
you have to.
Have you, Sandra, got anything that you would like to advise us? You know, would it, you know, is it going to be too rushed if we have it for, or?
I think my preference would be, because I have started writing.
Sorry.
I've started writing the report that usually do a presentation like a PowerPoint. We've put it into a PowerPoint presentation. I have started writing that. I mean, 4th May, if you want to go before the elections, would be preferable. It gives a bit more time. I'm just sort of slightly concerned. And I know some do it during PERDA because essentially there is a member of the public, even though we haven't got a poll. I'm just worried slightly about what people might comment because the majority of you Conservatives in basically to unitary.
Can I ask, have Rishton done theirs?
Not as far as I know, and I know Rawns were going to have theirs this week, but they've cancelled it.
The only reason is because obviously, because I think that's a really good point with the PERDA.
Yeah.
I think that's because that's, you know, that's kind of what I'm getting back. I know David Jennings got nothing to do with this meeting, but it's something that obviously, you know, he knows all this stuff and he's filtering through to be super careful about PERDA. And I think that's a really good point. And I'd not thought that. And I think that's a really good point.
Especially if you'll be looking to do it a couple of days before the election.
Councillor Redding,
yeah.
PERDA.
Yeah, I imagine that Rushden wouldn't be holding it before the election due to the fact I think they've got a couple of contested
Yeah, they have, yeah.
wards for the town council, never mind obviously the unitary. I agree that it does seem to be, it's possibly a bit political and may actually be illegal because everybody on this council, whether independent or with a party against their name, stood for, you know, in that way. We never stood as long-term residents or anything like that.
Yeah.
So whatever we do, even as independents, we would be making some sort of political point, I would have thought. So I think I'd be getting very concerned about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right.
I think for avoidance of all doubt, it'd be better going after the elections, thinking about it.
So shall we have a revote on that, or do you want me just to say put my vote forward and it'll?
Yeah, sort it out, Madam Mayor.
Just put your vote for it then, Madam Mayor.
Well, I shall vote for it after the elections, which means that vote is carried then.
Right, so I'm looking at the 11th of May to just try and get it out of the way before we get into mayor making, etc.
Oh,
And
gosh,
we will
that's
do
another
it.
thing, isn't it? Yes.
I know, but if we do it virtually,
Isn't, oh, hang on, the 11th of May.
When's mayor making plan for?
17th of May.
17th, right.
Then you've got full council the 25th, which we still don't know whether we're face to face or.
No. So we're going to say that the annual town meeting is going to be on the 11th of May.
Yeah.
And everybody agrees with that?
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Okay, right. Thank you, Sandra, for your input on that. Right, item 9 on the agenda is CCTV, to review the specification for CCTV in advance of the contract review. It is on page 8 in your agenda pack. And Sandra, you're going to run through this for us.
Yeah, I mean, we're on a 3-year contract, which actually expires next March, but we have to give 6 months notice. So we will have to start looking at getting prices now. It's easy to get prices for somebody to provide cameras. I think the more difficult part is the monitoring, which we have. That does restrict the number of companies that can do that. So I need to understand from the council if the specification is to remain the same as at the moment, i.e. including monitoring.
But if we didn't have somebody monitoring it, what's the point of having CCTV cameras? We need to have somebody.
No, what happens then, you can then go back to it's recorded, and then you just go back to the footage and get the images off. But obviously the advantage we have at key times, we have somebody there who's active bringing the police if things are going on.
Okay. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. My preference is to have it monitored. There's been numerous occasions over the last couple of months where the CCTV operative has spotted something and rang it in on our behalf, and police have attended. Also, I point to the graffiti, etc., and the nature of that graffiti that was captured as it happened and was rang in, and that happened so quick, and that the images got sent to the PCSO, and the PCSO is now in a liaison with the school. So without that chain of events would not have happened. So for me, I'll go all the way back to where Sandra and I were in the play-in and they saw the bins being set on fire. So to me, it's imperative that those CCTVs need to be monitored, because the antisocial behaviour we're experiencing at the moment is accelerating, and we need to be really mindful of that.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
The whole idea of monitoring is that they choose themselves when they feel there is likely to be the most problems. And so that way you do get it caught at the time. Unfortunately, the police are not always able to respond because of lack of resources. But then again, that's a problem we've got to deal with the police. But I feel it should be monitored about the same amount that we're having. I know it's expensive, but it is no point in just seeing an incident, say, oh, that's what happened. But it's very difficult to actually prove. Unless you actually arrest the individuals, the chances of actually getting a conviction on them is pretty slim. So we've got to have it monitored so that there's a possibility we can pick them up.
The 70 hours a week, Sandra, is that like 10 hours a day, or?
I do know, I mean, most of it is over the weekend, but I don't want him to, in a public meeting, give an indication of when it's happening.
Point taken. So. Right,
but I have to say, it's the same for all the towns. It's done at the same time, and it is based on when you would expect. So,
yeah,
it to be done.
Right, thank you.
And they can zoom it. They can zoom in. If they see an incident kicking off, they can zoom in and at the same time try and get a response from the police at the same time to pick them up. Whereas if you're just putting it on a screen, you can miss that point until somebody says, did you see all this damage to whatever? And then if they go back, what's the point?
Councillor Redding.
Thank you. My working out of this is we would have to give notice at the end of September at the latest. That's 6 months beforehand. If we consider that the unitary will try and settle down, if they haven't already started looking at this, I would hope that they would have made a decision what they're going to do by about June, beginning of June, or we certainly be asking questions about possible financial support. So I would have thought we could possibly defer this slightly until June, July, before we have to make a decision that we would possibly end the current contract and be looking at a new one. And I'm certain that the company wanting that CCTV contract with and we wanting monitoring, I'm sure a company will come up within a very short period of time with a price. I don't think it will take them more than 4 weeks at most. And
Okay.
I'll pass over to VJ now, as he's got his hand up there.
Right, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, the 70 hours monitoring a week, given that the current contract covers Rushden, Earthingborough and Daventry, this is quite simple. Is that one person looking at all 3 territories, or is it people looking at the 70 hours?
It is one person. I mean, you're quite welcome to go and have a visit to the control room. I would say we have a much better service than when we were under Kettering. Originally, we were under Kettering when we first took the service on, and they were looking at masses of cameras. But working with
the centre,
they're based at Daventry, and it has taken a while to get a really good relationship with the police and get the system of how the footage gets to the police. It's taken a few years to get that bedded in, and they've also got a piece of kit now that means when there's something going on, it can be linked live through to the police control room. I mean, when we had the problems with the Green Dragon, when released lockdown last time, that was one of the key things that was being used at CCTV to get action taken at the time, to do with the license and getting the police out. So it was important, and but I think you do need to go and probably have a visit at some point, because it is really interesting. And sometimes there'll be 2 people there, or sometimes there'll be 1. But the lady I deal with, she's really good. I email her and said, "Oh, between these times, can you see anything?" She comes back to me very quickly and says, "Yes, I've got this. No, I haven't."
Thank you, Councillor Paul.
How many cameras do you have? Sorry, in Higham.
We have 4.
I thought it was
I think
7.
about 7 or 8, I think, is off the top of my head. We've got 4 around the high street, and then we've got a lot we've got 4 around the playing field. Actually, must have 8. We've got 4 around the playing field, because that was one of the things we did. We merged the systems, because originally the system on the playing field was back to the town council, and it was down to the officers to have a look. But it's much better to have a company doing it because of all the legislation and requirements to do with CCTV monitoring that you have to meet.
And last question, sorry, I don't want to drag it on. How much are we paying for this monitoring?
At the moment, you pay just under 50. I think it's 15,000 a year for it. And they look after all the cameras. So if the cameras go down, they look at that. They come in if we've had problems with the equipment, and that includes the telephone link that you need back to the monitoring centre.
Okay. All right.
So I think what tonight we're looking at whether we need the same specification.
Yes, and and I think that's key. Whether you want monitoring or not, and I get the impression you do want monitoring, because that restricts down the number of companies. Because so you need somebody who can do that, and there's a lot of companies out there can provide the cameras.
Yes, but we need So I think, would somebody like to propose that we actually have the same specification that we have at the moment? Councillor Whiting.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to propose that. I mean, what we've got at the moment is working well. You know, when they say, don't they, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think we've got to be careful as well, because if everybody else is getting theirs paid for by the new unitary, I think we've got to ask that question. But we want to keep the same standard as what we've already got.
Yes,
I'll second that.
Right, thank you. And all those in favour, would you please show of hands? Right, thank you. That's unanimous. Right, item 2 on the agenda is Legionella, to adopt a Legionella management policy. Right, Sandra sent through the policy. Do you want to talk about this at all, Sandra?
All I will say, because of how long the pavilion's been closed and we've had showers, I decided to get an external company to come in and risk assess the pavilion, but also to undertake water samples and temperature testing. There's been no problem with the water samples. We haven't got Legionellas, but it has sort of flagged up that going forward, especially when the pavilion is still closed, we need to be undertaking temperature testing and keeping the risk of Legionella under review.
Right.
So that's why I've put forward the Legionella policy. Although I am formally appointed as the person responsible for the council for health and safety, apparently you have to have a person who's nominated as a responsible person. I've already got the temperature thermometer to do, and so we need to start undertaking temperature testing, but also I'm getting a quote for a deep clean of the pavilion anyway, because it will start to be used soon, including the shower heads.
Right, so can we look at 10.1, and it's to adopt the Legionella management policy. So can I propose, sorry, Councillor Gardner, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I was involved in something very similar when I was working at social services, risk assessing Legionnaire's disease. And can I say, Sandra, this is absolutely spot on.
Right.
From my point of view, for the training that I've had, I absolutely say, well, we should adopt this.
Right, thank you. So is that, sorry, Councillor Whiting, do you want to say something?
Yes, please, Madam Chair. All I was going to say was, I think it's a brilliant idea that we got it given the circumstances, and I'd like to propose, if we can, to propose item 10 to adopt the Legionella management policy and all the following on block, if we can do that.
Do you want, do you want to, yes, we can receive note of the risk assessment. You want to do it all on block?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, yes. So we want to adopt the Legionnaire management policy. We want to receive and note the risk assessment. Are there any questions on the risk assessment?
No.
Can I just ask, Sandra, what areas did they not have access to?
There wasn't any areas where there was water that they didn't have access to, and I know they're probably worried about dead legs, but we had to meet the water regulations, we had an inspector out from Anglian Water about 2 years ago now, and we had to undertake certain works that were highlighted by them, which included closing off any dead legs. Right. So as far as I'm concerned, they had access to everywhere, because I was with him when he did the inspection, and I walked round.
Can I just ask you what a dead leg is?
It's a length of pipe where the water is static.
But it's not going anywhere.
Well, because if you've got a shower or a hot tap, when you draw off the water, you've got hot water coming through, that heats up. But of course, if there's a T off where they perhaps drain off the whole system, that gets slightly heated, and this is the problem. If it's not hot enough, it doesn't kill off the germs, so therefore they multiply.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we are going to adopt the Legionnaire management policy. We're going to receive and note the risk assessment. We are going to appoint the town clerk as responsible person for Legionella, and we are going to appoint the assistant clerk, I hope, as the deputy responsible person for Legionella. Have we got a yes from you, Alicia?
I know, I've got to talk to Alicia about that.
So, can you consider yourself talked to about it, please?
But no, there is an online training course that I will get Alicia to do.
That was going to be my next question, is the training. Right, so all of those proposals are on the table. So could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that. Oh.
Right, thank you. And could I have show of hands of all those in favour, please? All right, thank you. That's carried. Right. Item 11 on the agenda are budgets, 2020 to 2022, and the end of year transfers. To consider report from the town clerk. Did we all manage to get that report? Has anybody got any questions for Sandra?
No.
Sandra, is there anything that you want to say about it?
No, I did say they are draft, because I'm still working on the end of the year's accounts, because if we're getting any bills that relate to last year, I have to adjust the figures for that, but I think we're almost there. I had one more today, which is for the printing of the Higham Times. In terms, we've managed very well within the budgets. I was flagged up in the report about the burial fees, which is what they want. So it's always an estimate, and I think what's impacted on it is the fact that we're not pre-selling plots anymore,
Right.
which is probably the first full year we've not been doing that. In terms of other budgets that have gone over the 15%, are all income ones actually, because the cricket and bowls club, the tennis club bookings and grants, we've actually received more income in than we budgeted for, and that's partially because we've had unexpected grants, but also it was a difficult year because we didn't invoice, for example, the tennis club like we normally do because there was periods of lockdown. But then in reverse, we did have a lot of public bookings at the tennis club, tennis courts, which actually boosted our income. And it was the same with the cricket club. We gave them a reduced fee based on match use rather than the annual fee. So, and we actually did better than what we anticipated.
Oh,
so I think in terms of budgets, in terms of the difficult year, we've probably come out well compared to some councils who have got facilities where they rely very much on income to manage their budgets.
okay.
So we've underspent, to be honest, in a lot of places.
All right, thank you. Anybody got any questions? So I propose that we've what do we adopt these reports, Sandra?
It's just receive a note, and I wanted just to in the end, in terms of transfer to earmarked reserves, my suggestion is that we transfer the bulk of the money that's sat in the budget for the community building, because it's sat in a project building budget at the moment, and we're not actually going to use it
right
at the moment. So if it goes over to the earmarked reserved, it's sort of sat there in the earmarked reserve ready for the project, and it will start to show how we're building those funds up for the community building. Because irrespective if you don't go ahead with the community building, you're going to have to do something with the sports pavilion.
True.
Because it is looking very dilapidated.
Yes. Right. So can we receive and accept the reports on the budget and agree to the transfer?
Yeah, there's 2 transfers there in report.
Right. Could I have a seconder for that, please?
Second.
Councillor Redding, and all those in favour, would you please show hands? Right, thank you. Right. Item 12 on the agenda. Items to report. To report any item not included on the agenda. No decisions can be taken under this item. Has anybody got anything they wish to add on to an item, another agenda? Yes, Councillor Redding.
Thank you. It's really only a quick one. As we know, last weekend the play area at Stanwick Lakes was burnt down. I hadn't realised until that moment there was a charitable organisation that was running it all, and they almost certainly have some form of insurance, and whether it will actually cover the replacement of that. So I did wonder whether at a certain time, next meeting of the council or what have you, maybe should we discuss whether to make a donation of a smallish donation towards the rebuilding or the security of the play area in the future.
Thank you. I think it's Rockingham Forest Trust, isn't it, that actually own Stanwick Lakes. So Councillor Jackson.
There was a report that already people have started donating monies, but instead of saying that it would be put towards the refurbishment of they stated, yes, they will be rebuilding it, but are proposing to spend this money elsewhere. So it almost sounds as if they've got insurance that will cover it once they get all the investigations finished.
Right. Thank you. Well, the aim of the item 12 on the agenda is to actually put something on the agenda for next meeting. So do you still want to have that on the agenda for the next meeting without discussion at this meeting?
Who are you talking to?
Councillor Redding, he was the one.
Yes, I mean, the next P&R meeting, which is going to be in, it's a month's time, isn't it?
No, it'll be
2 months.
August.
June.
August.
June, yeah.
I do wonder whether it might be more suitable coming to full council before then. I mean, I'm quite happy for it to be brought to the P&R committee in August, but as I say, that might be getting on a bit late, or it's.
Can I suggest, Councillor Redding, in terms of standing order, that you put a motion forward or submit a motion to Alicia if you want it on the next as a formal motion with an amount in it to be considered by the town council.
Yeah, okay, right, I'll do that. Yeah.
Right, thank you. And Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to say, this isn't for debating at this time. It's only items to report, but it was reported on the Anglia News that they have actually reached their target of £100,000.
Right, thank you. Right, I think that might answer your question, Councillor Redding. Right, so item 13 on the agenda is the date of the next meeting, which is the 15th of June. My goodness, that's the year half over.
Oh, yeah.
In 2021, it says 2020.
Yeah.
2021. Right, but so thank you.
It should be almost free by then.
Thank you for attending tonight's meeting, and Sandra, I do hope you have enjoyed the rest of your holiday, and please don't look at your emails. Don't read the text messages.